Hello and welcome to our mega club by club AFL draft preview for 2025. The last chance we'll have a look at your club's potential plans for November's intake. We've got draft hands, list needs, club type prospects, and most importantly, the names your club might be selecting come the draft.
Draft season is well and truly underway. Head to zerohanger.com.au for all your latest draft news, draft features, and analysis. Head to Zero Hanger's YouTube for mock drafts, power rankings, and more. Mitch, let's get into it.
Let's do it. We are 3 weeks away from the national draft getting underway. I think less than 3 weeks now as we shoot on a Thursday. We'll get into all 18 clubs, draft hand, who they're tied to, list needs, potential targets. Anything you want to address before we get stuck into it?
No, without further ado, let's get stuck in. We'll start with Adelaide.
Let's do alphabetical. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll start with Adelaide. Their draft hand is a pick 16, pick 48, pick 55, pick 73, pick 75 as it stands. There are 1,026 points they've got. We know that there is the window for pick swapping ahead of the draft. Obviously, pick swapping on draft night is a possibility as well. So theirs is a hand that might move. But and we'll go through each club's club-tied prospects as well. Their club-tied prospect is Mitch Stevens, who if he was to get picked up would be more so as a rookie list spot, a speedy halfback out of the Gippsland regions. In terms of list needs, the way I see it is probably some midfield depth in the next generation and preferably strong midfielders as well. Someone who's going to be a bull, someone who's going to be an inside contested ball-winning sort of a player. But I think there's also scope for them to add some flair and dash to make it a more modern mix in the engine room.
Yep, I think you've nailed it on the head. The latter being maybe suitable for the Rankins and the Rochellis. The long-term profile of their midfield probably includes those two. Jake Soligo, Jordan Dawson's 28, so 6 good years or 6 years left in the system. When you talk about probably the average for players of his age, Jake Soligo and Sid Draper is the other one. Dan Curtin, do they see him as a long-term midfielder? Obviously, a great year on the wing, as we know, can play key defensive posts at either end of the field. But I do like, just a strong in and under midfielder who can, kind of wrestle his way through a pack and get the ball to a Draper, Rankin, Dawson on the outside.
Yeah.
Who would you have top of the list? So they come in at pick 16. That might push to pick 20 by the time they're on the clock. But who do you might see in that range for that selection?
I think someone in that range, if you're looking at it from a pure power rankings point of view, that's probably going to be available is that Ollie Greaves type of player.
Yep.
He's probably seen in that middle part of the first round, later part of the first round. He's obviously polarizing. Some don't have him in the first round at all, but he'll probably fall somewhere in that area of the draft. So I think he's the one that makes the most sense for them. Like Dyson Sharp would be great, but unless they're going to trade up, he's going to be off the board. They're the ones that make the most sense. Then you've probably got a little bit of a gap before you do get to the next group of midfielders like your Sam Swadlings, your Blake Wood, Sean Beniers that aren't club tied. So I think Ollie Greaves is the ideal, but it might end up being someone like a Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves or a Harley Barker that's more of an outside sort of a mover. I mean, obviously no Harley Barker South Australian. That gives them some good movement, some good transition ball movement, but doesn't necessarily address that need of that in and under player, which is probably the preference.
Yeah, when you go through maybe like the tiers or pecking order of our rankings and for those type of midfielders, like you said, Greaves is maybe in that sweet spot for them. Sharp too far up. Jacob Farah would have to slide a little bit to get to them, but as you kind of briefed earlier, there is room for them to move up if they choose to do so and look into their future selections. Let's roll into Brisbane. Pick 17, 23, 44, 51, 59, 68, 79. So 79 is the last pick we'll include in these draft hands. Obviously, there is, as we saw in the trade period, picks in the hundreds that can be traded. But for this sake, I think we're only going back to the end of the 4th round of the draft. And this is obviously going to vary between list spots for each club. Some clubs might have 5 list spots and use 5th, 6th round selections, or you'll have other clubs who actually won't even be in the draft this year, which we'll get to a bit later on. But for Brisbane, they exited trade period with 1,756 draft points, which is I guess a good total to have when calculating where Dan Annable might fit into the I guess order of this year's draft queue. On top of that, though, Isaac Waller, Time Printable, Harry Bridge are others they'll have in mind as most likely late national draft selections or rookie spots for the reigning premiers, who, when we focus on Dan Annable, look like they'll add a fourth or fifth first round prospect from that. And when you factor in the last 3 national drafts, when they had both Ashcroft boys, Jasper Fletcher and Sam Marshall, and then Ty Gallup was an early or mid second round, pick 42.
Pick 42. Yep.
So obviously their academy and father-son prospects have boded really well for them in the last few years, and it's going to continue with Dan Annable.
Yeah, so Dan Annable, ready-made, can play AFL next year. The biggest challenge for him isn't actually getting himself AFL ready in a way. It's actually trying to break into a premiership winning Brisbane Lions midfield, particularly when they did have so many players missing this year across the board. So, yeah, he's one that will strengthen the Lions. Just to profile the others, Isaac Waller, tall utility, probably a ruck forward. Ty Brindable, played some VFL as a pressure forward. And Harry Bridge, we didn't see much of him this year, but a very good kickoff halfback. And probably a little bit underrated because he's been out of sight, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a bid come for him or Brisbane to try and get him at the national or rookie draft. In terms of list needs, it's clearly the priority for Brisbane is to get Dan Annable in. He's the star. They don't probably have too many list gaps, given they're the premiers and they are coming off a season where, like we say, they did have so many injuries. So they've got plenty to fill with. Yeah,
it's just quick maths for Brisbane fans who haven't done it just yet. For Dan Annable, if a bid came in at pick 4, they would be, I think it's 10 points shy. So if they try and get a later pick in before they suspect a bid in the top 4 could come, then that'll be the case. Pick 5, you're fine, but doesn't leave you much else for the rest of the draft. Obviously, you still have later picks to use. Obviously, if Brisbane's 17, 23, 44 and 51 all get swallowed up, then that does mean that 59, 68, 79 all move up in the queue as well, and they might end up having points by the time they're on the clock, or if another bid comes through for a Prindable or a Waller or a Bridge. So there's a little bit to play out still for Brisbane, but very unlikely that Dan Annable doesn't become a Brisbane Lion, just given the access that clubs get to these academy prospects, the discounts they receive, and the deficits that they can go in if they don't have the points anyway. Another club who will be of great focus when it comes to bidding on night 1 of the draft will be Carlton, who have picks 9, 11, 43, 54, 67 and 72, tallying 2,758 draft points. We'll go through the club-tied boys first, because I guess for Brisbane, they don't really have any targets, given most of their drafting will probably be academy focused. But for Carlton, they'll be in a position to get both club-tied and maybe some open pool prospects as well, given their draft hand and how they're set up outside of coming out of the trade period. So Harry Dean, Jack Ison, Ty Gresham, they're 3 headline club-tied boys for this year's draft. Harry Dean being one of great focus, given his potential top 5 bid, and they hold picks 9 and 11. So there's going to be a little bit of calculating to do for the Blues, and maybe some pick maneuvering, but nevertheless they'll definitely be getting Dean through the door, and it's a standout key position defender who also suits a list need, you'd say. Yeah,
absolutely it does. He's the modern sort of defender with his athletic profile and his ability to mark. We've talked last week, I think, about the fact that picks 9 and 11 are just at such an awkward spot. Like, do they stay at pick 9 and 11 on draft night? Or, 9 and 11 will push back regardless because of the bids for Ezekiel and Dylan Patterson and Dan Annable that'll come before Harry Dean. But do they try and maneuver some things, like you said, to ensure that they're able to maximise what they get out of this draft, not just matching a bid for Harry Dean and Jack Ison, who's a forward midfielder and has certainly rocketed up the order, but also get in some sorts of players that they need. And I think from a list profile point of view, the clear glaring hole for me is small forwards. They've done some work on Lockie Doveston. Whether he's still there when they have their pick remains to be seen, and will depend on where their first pick ends up being. Latrell Sumner-Pickett is another small forward who could go around the first round sort of region. And then if it was a later pick, then someone like a Taylor Byrne might be one that they look at. But outside of small forwards, inside 50 connection would be another one. Probably just good ball movement across the ground. I think Ali Barker.
Add Hugo Makunda to probably the list of names you had before is another one. I think good ball movement for Carlton is a need across the field from the back pocket to the forward pocket. So there could be a halfback option in there for them at that second selection. I think in our mock draft they ended up having a pick in the low 20s after a bid for Harry Dean came in at pick 8. So we're talking among the final maybe 3, 4, or 5 spots in the first night of the draft.
Yeah.
So Oscar Taylor's one that could be in that mark. A third list need for me would be key position players. Now, if they're getting Harry Dean as a key defender, you're probably looking at the other end of the field, particularly when
they have got Harry O'Farrell at the defensive end as well.
That too as well. So you look at their key forwards. They've lost Charlie Curnow, so you've got Harry Mackay. They deal-list Harry Lemmy. It's Brody Kemp, who's got an Achilles injury and stands at 192 centimeters. And then it's Hudson O'Keefe, who's probably maybe more of a ruckman than he is a forward. So I think they're certainly lacking in that area where they want to go for an experienced delisted free agent is certainly one option for them. But it's certainly going to tell us maybe how they see their list for the coming years. If maybe they look at the draft and go for a key forward at the draft, like an Archie Ludowick, maybe a Louis Emmett, who can be that supporting ruck forward, when they've got Liam Reedy in, and what the direction we're seeing with ruckman at the moment as well. You probably need a bit more versatility than one big-bodied guy. So there's a few options there for him. Mitch Marsh might be in that range for them, although, like I said, he's probably a bit more undersized. So if they want that new age key forward, then it's probably going to be a Ludowick or an Emmett in the range that they're in. And then that adds to Jack Ison and Ty Gresham some front half options for them for the long term. So a little bit for the Blues to work out still on draft night, but they're going to come away with a pretty good haul, I would have thought. Assuming they get someone in between the Dean and Ison bids.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. We move to Collingwood. Their draft hand has 407 points, Mitch. So they've got, at the moment, picks 39, 45, 56, 61, 77. It won't be that on draft night because they will have to match a bid. You assume they will match a bid for Zach McCarthy, the key forward. He fits what they need perfectly.
Perfect.
They're probably short in a few areas across the ground just owing to how old they've been, and that's been a clear narrative this year, but they haven't really had that spearhead forward for a long, long time. Brody Myercheck's probably played that role in recent times as a significantly undersized option. So bring in Zach McCarthy and someone who can play that relieving ruck role for the long term is something that'd be really positive. They've also got Jai Saxonar, who might come onto the rookie list or be a later option for them as a small forward type. As well, we know that Tom McGuan was linked to them, but the Pies have said they won't match a bid for him. Certainly. They may bring him in via the rookie draft if he gets through that far. Yeah,
he's still in their draft plans, just not officially club tied, I guess, in a way for them. As you mentioned, for McCarthy, it's well timed to have a player of his quality, and 200 centimeter key forwards don't grow on trees, and so it's pretty lucky that one comes out of your academy. Key forward definitely being, or key position in particular, probably being list needs for them, and they'll tick that one off with a key forward in McCarthy. But others, do they look at key defender and maybe and midfield depth as well? So if you're looking at the maybe midfield options for them at what's going to be quite later in the draft, you would expect that their first selection at pick 39 probably is used in a bid for McCarthy. It's going to be in a quite interesting range if a club pulls the trigger right before the Pies are on the clock with their first selection. But that 39 selection is also doing a fair bit of heavy lifting in their points, given 56, 61 and 77 don't have any points value. In saying that, though, by the time the Pies are matching a bid for McCarthy, 56 should come into the top 54 and have a points value. 61, hard to tell, but there'd certainly be a chance. Blakewood, Sean Benier, they like SA boys, and if there's a clean kicking midfielder that they wouldn't mind looking at, he's probably one towards the top of the list.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if there's a more athletic type that they're after and someone who's been noted for his professionalism, then Jack Dalton from Victoria might be one they target if they wanted some height. Then a couple to look at from a South Australia perspective, noting their preference to draft from that state in recent years. Bryce Sanders, a little bit of a bolter, got a state combine invite, and is quite athletic himself, actually can play at either end of the field, is one that could fill a role in the forward line or back line, 197 centimetres. Great upside because he doesn't have that strong footy background, and you're probably in this draft, as we've discussed a few times, Mitch, more likely to take a punt on someone that's speculative if you've got one of those later picks than someone who's a bit more established, just given the noted shallowness of the talent pool. And Elliot Duffield, another one who's in there that's probably been underrated. We've talked about him a fair bit. I've been a fan of what he's done, particularly for South Australia, the national champs, as a lockdown sort of defender.
Yeah, just over 190 centimeters, so he's
Yeah.
not that new age key defender, but what he
Can
does,
take a mark as well.
yeah, and what he does make up for in maybe like a size is some clean kicking, which is what you want in those
Yep.
medium sized guys. So he's one, and then adding to Dalton and Ucho Benny maybe a Fred Rodriguez if they want that more contested option, but maybe they still want a bit more pace through midfield, and like you said, Ucho Benny and Dalton, all three of those guys would be great options for them, and just given where Collingwood's draft hands at later into the count, so obviously no guarantees with where the Pies sit. And
Rodriguez and Ned Long in the same midfield is an interesting.
Yeah,
one
that's
for me.
the other
yeah,
thing. It's
they
lose they I guess Carlton Mitchell, and that's probably a point of where they maybe want to head a little bit. It's not necessarily we lose that guy and we try and get a replacement for him. So they're kind of the options for Collingwood, certainly from a midfield point of view. Essendon will be maybe the biggest player, maybe outside of West Coast, the biggest player on draft night.
Certainly.
Picks 5, 6, 21, 27, 30. So that's 5,162 draft points. 5 and 6 doing most of that and won't really be needed from a draft points perspective. But 21, 27, and 30 certainly make a good tally for potential club-tied bids for Adam Swade and Hussein Al-Ashkar, who also might have bids after those picks. So it's going to be quite fascinating how Essendon's draft hand plays out. For Swade and Al-Ashkar, maybe the former being a potential late first round option, Al-Ashkar early second round, mid second round option potentially as well.
Second round at some point,
So they'll still think worst case scenario, like if a bid for Swade comes at 20 and Al-Ashkar maybe 10 spots later, but they'll be well set up with the picks they've got and getting in a midfield forward who probably starts forward for in his career, and then Al-Ashkar, a pure small forward to add to the Isaac Kako selection from last year. So it's two great club-tied NGA boys to add to what's been a real promising pathways program at Tullamarine.
Yeah, well summed up. It's a draft they need to nail because they've been indifferent up and down the draft in the last couple of years, but I think their last couple of drafts, particularly including the mid-season draft, they've done really well at. So hopefully they're able to continue that trend this year in terms of potential targets with those two top picks. And we know there's been murmurings of them wanting to move around and move up, whether that ends up eventuating, whether anyone is willing enough to part with a top selection, you'd probably suggest not. But it's worth putting on the radar that that's something that they're exploring.
I can't see them move up. Yeah. And moving back, I don't know if they need to get a fifth player through. I think if you have your top two and then Swade and Al-Ashkar, it's a pretty good hand. There'll be scope for them to trade in maybe later in the draft if they see someone they like, but I don't think they need to be splitting a fifth or sixth pick and getting another bite at the apple in the first round when you've got kind of two guys.
It'd be more so moving up, I think, which it'd be tough to do. But I think in terms of potential targets, and I've been pretty strong on this throughout the last sort of second half of the season, I think Sam Cumming is one that just suits them really, really well as a forward midfielder. Hard to match up on, can get you in the air, dynamic on the ground as well. Xavier Taylor is going to be right around that range if they go for best available, so give them a bit of punch off half back, and Sam Grill if they're looking for some some speed in the midfield rather. Yeah,
there's outside run I think is best available is the key for them.
Yeah.
They're going to be in this spot where it's a bit of a wait and see with West Coast and Richmond and what they do, but you'd think there's one of Cumming, Grill, Taylor or Roby available to them. Dyson Sharp's certainly another one that they'll consider if he's through to their selections. So it's going to be probably two of those guys you'd think come draft night for the Bombers. It's going to mostly be midfielders unless it's Xavier Taylor who's taken. And that's just kind of the profile of this year's top 10 or so players and who we kind of expect to be off the board by the time Essendon are on the clock.
Probably worth noting as well, if West Coast don't go Cooper Duff Tytler, he might be one that ends up at Essendon.
Yeah, definitely.
If he's on the board, he'd be one that they take. But probably expect that he's gone by the time.
My belief, and we had the mock draft and looked at kind of alternative endings after our first one, and he'd certainly be one in Essendon's sights. I think they had Cumming and Sharp in that mock draft, and there's certainly consideration from West Coast, from Richmond, and then from Essendon to select him, and ended up sliding more than maybe both of us expected. So, member of their VFL program this year and a key position player of his quality. will certainly be attractive for the Bombers going forward.
Keep the Calder boys together, absolutely, with the two Essendon NGAs. Freo, we move on to their draft hand. Pick 20, pick 47, pick 69, so 875 points. The main player that they may look to match a bid for is Toby Wan, who season has potentially been a little bit underrated or overshadowed from a holistic point of view by the fact that he didn't perform at the under-18s national championships the way he would have liked. By admission, had a chat to him earlier in the year about that, and you can catch that story on Zero Hanger, but certainly at a Waffle Colts level, his form was very, very electric, and he's one that Freo might look to match a bid for, but they will have that late first round selection certainly before a bid comes. There's a couple of list needs they could look to. And I think front half sizzle's probably one of those. Add a little bit of dynamism and punch into their front half.
Yeah, the draft order I'm looking at, when you've got Gold Coast and Brisbane having 3 of the picks from 15 to 18. So if they hold those into bids, then they all get swallowed up.
Yeah.
And if one of those bids for either Patterson, Newland or Annabelle comes after Dean, and the Dean bid comes early, then Carlton could be slotting right in front of Fremantle. Two clubs that will probably be looking at small forwards.
Yeah.
And if Lockie Doverson's off the clock and Carlton pull the trigger on Latrell Sumner to pick it, it's gonna potentially make Freo put Freo in an interesting position. If they really had their sights on both of those guys, and none of them are available at pick 20, which will come back and forth a little bit in the queue. So Latrell Sumner to pick it would be the one I would circle for them.
Yep.
If Lockie Doverston, who we assume is probably off the board.
Yep.
As that front half. Spark, pace,
menace.
Zip. Yeah, menace is a great word to use. Just a lively front half option for them.
Yep.
I know Hibbins-Hargreaves might be the next name. Not as a pure forward, but certainly sees career starting there a little bit. And I think front half sizzle comes from Shea Bolton being more of a midfielder and a player who probably complements Isaiah Dudley. They've got Sam Switkowski as that defensive reinforcement in the front half, and Michael Frederick's probably starting to push a bit further up in the midfield more and more each season. So, there's certainly an option for someone there to learn off Bolton and become that pure small forward threat. Murphy Reid was that this year, but another one that will probably play midfield.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've summed that up pretty well. There's also an opportunity for them to strengthen their defensive stocks, I think, in a couple of different ways. So do they want an accountable sort of ground level defender? So someone like an Oscar Taylor. I think Oscar Taylor went to Freo in our mock draft, or he was certainly considered to go to Freo.
He was.
He was, so good one-on-one, good kick. So really good balance. Or do they look to strengthen their tall stocks in the post-Alex Pearce sort of era and get someone like a Blake Threadgold, who I think is going to go a lot higher than some people might expect.
I think he's one that's right in that spot, that pick 20 spot for them. You're right. Yeah, Alex Pearce is 31, I want to say. Well, early 30s, and a successor for him. They do have Josh Draper, who's looked really accountable as a tall one-on-one defender. But then Luke Ryan's another one who's well into the twilight of his career. So who's the third tall with Brennan Cox and Josh Draper on that last line? Jordan Clark's still that outlet option, and Judd McVie, while can be an accountable one-on-one defender, looks likely to play further up the field. So there's as good as their backline is, there's probably a spot there for a tall. And I think Blake Threadgold with his intercepting ability is maybe the best matchup for them.
The one I don't mind for them, but he probably falls in between their two picks. Pick 20 being too high when it becomes higher as well. Pick 47 is potentially already gone, is Rory Wright. And then there's also whether they'd be willing to pull the trigger on a player from a club that is known as being an area of Melbourne where there is that go home factor.
Yeah.
But I don't mind that as a match for what they need.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, good overhead, good kick. Quite a solid player. And you're right. 47 is. It comes up a little bit in the draft.
Not
queue.
Enough.
It's going to be quite fascinating, and they'll be in that bracket, but they might not be in the best position to get him. You're right. Geelong, draft hand 19, 40, 60, 78 for just over 1,000 points. Jesse Miller, the leading of two club tie guys, will have Ben Wrongton in there off his ACL season, and probably as a rookie list or Cat B option, I guess they get access to when they're overlooked in the national draft, and they do have club tied I guess, tied to the club as a NGA prospect, so they can list him as a Cat B if he slips all the way through to past draft night too. But Jesse Mellor's another one who, late draft night form or maybe is a rookie draft option. It's kind of hard to get a read exactly on where he might sit in the grand scheme of things, but for the Cats at the very least, they'll have two kids that they've at least got access to, have shown quite good promise over the last 18 months.
Yeah, I had a chat to Geelong coach Paul Corrigan about Jesse Mellor. He compared him to a Jake Stringer type, and that's a pretty cliche comparison, I suppose, to some degree. A lot of players get that comparison, but that's the sort of player that Geelong's getting, that real front half threat, the player who can play forward and is really hard to get on top of and then go into the midfield and be really damaging. In terms of list needs outside of Jesse Mellor, because like you said, they do have that pick 19 in particular that they can use to great effect. Halfback run?
Yeah, I think so. Lawson Humphries has been a great find, and he'll be their halfback for the long term, assuming he gets a fresh contract. But I don't think that Jack Martin will be a long-term halfback option. It was just a good way for him to get his feet back on the ground and on the field. So I think there's another option there for them to fill. Zach Guthrie's probably plays a bit taller, and Tom Stewart is equally probably in a similar position that is accountable defensively and can offer some punch from the back, but bit of pace. And Oscar Taylor, I think in our first mock draft, was taken by the Cats.
Yep.
So right. I think he would be a good fit in that 19 range. So certainly an option for them. Key forward, maybe another one. Big tick with obviously Jeremy Cameron and Shannon Neal being their two guys, but Cameron, I think, is 32 or 33 next year.
Yeah.
And what's the long term view for Geelong, who tried to get Charlie Curnow and didn't. Yeah. And quality key forwards like him and Cameron don't come up very often, so that you do have to have some of that insurance, like they did with Shannon Neal in waiting for the post Tom Hawkins era. So who's next in Geelong's sights? They haven't had the best draft luck with some key position players over the last few years either. So hopefully there's a find here. Maybe it's Archie Ludovic with their first pick, Liam Heatherton maybe with their second pick. Like pick 40 is,
don't mind it. Yeah,
might come into the mid 30s, and he's probably in that range. So a player who we've spoken about at length this year, despite him not playing a lot of footy, just being a potential bargain option given the standing he had coming into this season as a key forward at 197 centimeters. I think he is. So good height, athletic, and would have heaps to learn off Jeremy Cameron in a preseason or two. So a few options there for the Cats, who at this stage will carry another first round pick into the draft.
Absolutely. Gold Coast have got some first round picks as well, but they won't use them. They will use them in a different way. They'll use them to match bids. So they've got picks 15, 18, 24, 28, 29, 36 and 52. That equals 3,773 points. The players that they will look to match bids on, or they'll have the opportunity to match bids on: Zeke Hewland, he'll go in the top 5. Dylan Patterson, we expect he'll go right around the same range. And then a little bit later in the first round, potentially Bo Adensall and Jai Murray. And then at some stage in the second round, Kobe Coulson. Kobe Coulson, a utility, hardworking, good under-18s national champs. Yeah, it's from a potential targets and club tide, you could probably just gel them into one. Yeah. If it was a Venn diagram, it'd just be one circle. So it's we've probably done this 2 or 3 times over the last month in trying to figure out when bids come for Hewland and Patterson and what that means for Murray and Adensall and Coulson, and they still have a fair bit of work to do, despite coming out with 2 first round picks and the first pick of the second round. There's a bit of work to be done for the Suns to make sure they get those boys. In saying that, though, they can go into deficit if they absolutely have to, and they'll be live trading or even trading before the draft to ensure that they get all 4 or 5 of those guys. So from a list needs point of view, there probably, when you even put the academy kids aside, there probably isn't clear standout, maybe small forward, but they are using guys like Lombard and Rogers as rotating options. They got Petrarca with Humphrey combining next year. I don't think they really have a clear list need, to be honest. And they get some good variety with Hewland and Patterson's versatility, Jai Murray and Bo Adensall and Kobe Coulson as well. So Suns fans couldn't be happier with the year they've had, and they're coming in with
what's likely going to be one of the best draft returns of 2025.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how they take. Outside of Bo Adensul, like you said, they're all versatile, so you could sort of start them, play them wherever you need, and some of them will eventually want to graduate into the midfield. But there's a fair few ahead in the pecking order with where Gold Coast sit at the moment. GWS's draft hand picks 12 and 35 they have, which equals 1,478 points. They have had some players linked to their academy, or they do have some players clearly linked to their academy this year. Jim Houston potentially the leading one there, but more unlikely than likely to get taken, you'd think. In terms of list needs, tall forwards for me is one area that they will look to target, I would have thought, to get someone in to support Aaron Cadman once Jesse Hogan retires.
Yeah, Jake Riccardi's that other guy, but yeah, I think there's certainly a need for another young, maybe ideally you're looking closer to 200 centimeters than you are 195.
Yeah.
So Archie Ludowic's maybe that guy. Louis Emmett's probably the other one in that similar range for them. From the key forwards, pick 12. Does Schubert get there?
Yeah.
It'll be quite fascinating. He certainly would be a chance, but there'll be interest from the 2 or 3 clubs ahead of the Giants, with, I guess, Carlton's picks come out, but Hawthorn and Melbourne, and I don't know if Essendon will be one, but there's certainly some options there for them from a key forwards point of view, and I think Schubert would be a great get for them, but if he's there, Ludovic, and if that's too early, how do they kind of work around pick 35? Do they get Louis Emmett available? It's going to be
Louis Emmett's probably that pick 35-ish range. And then I think their other need would be a halfback, is how I would sort of project it. So they might look to get a Josh Lindsay or a Jacob Farrow in with that pick 12 if either of those are still on the board, because they would be pretty close to best available as well, you'd think, at that point. So that might be one that works for them, and then look to get like a Louis Emmett type later, or if they were to get an Aiden Schubert, like you said, with that first pick, if he is still available, or an Archie Ludovic, then maybe Max Kondojanis is one that comes into their reckoning with that second selection. Yep.
Player you mentioned earlier, Rory Wright, another.
Absolutely.
There's like you said, they're in a kind of a funny spot with 12 being early for maybe key forwards after Schubert, but then they're in a good mix for a Lindsay or a Taylor, and then the flip side being that they'll have some good options at 35 too for, if Emmett's still there.
Avery Thomas. Yeah.
Avery Thomas is another. Yeah. There's a few kind of moving pieces for that, obviously, but there's 2 picks, good draft hand, two good spots to be in. You're not waiting too late into the night to kind of see where your pick falls.
Yeah.
So it'll be an interesting one for the Giants nonetheless. Hawthorn picks 10, 22, 62, 76, creating 1,962 draft points. Don't really have any leading club type guys probably in their calculations at this stage. But the 2 picks they do hold in the first round came after, we spoke about this last week, came after their aggressive play for Zach Merritt. They have delisted several players, so there might be a list spots requirement for them to fill. I don't know who their rookie players are that they might be getting upgrades for, but at this stage, if we say that they keep those 2 picks and who they might look at, there's probably midfielders being one list need, key defender another. So you look at that, is it Jacob Farrell at 10 and a Blake Threadgold at 22. From purely midfielders' point of view, do they want some more polish rather than the contest heavy? So Josh Lindsay as a long-term view midfielder. Farrow's one mentioned who can kind of play backline and through midfield, and then Ollie Greaves is a player who has links to the club in some way as a big-bodied midfielder.
Yeah, he does have links to the club, you're right. But like you said, whether he suits what they need in terms of that being that bigger body when they've got players like Newcomb in there already, I'm not sure. I do like the concept of a running halfback for them. So Josh Lindsay or Jacob Farrow might be good with that early selection. Move on to Melbourne. Their draft hand is pick 7, pick 8. Pick 37, pick 66, pick 71. That equals 3,283 points. Their 2 club-tied guys are possibilities for rookie selections, you'd think, more than anything else, in Kalani White, tall utility, who could have chosen Gold Coast Academy or the Melbourne Demons. He chose the Ds as a father-son selection, the son of Jeff White, and then Toby Cinema, who played a game for Casey late in the year on the wing from the Dandenong Stingrays, also represented Vic Country. In terms of list needs, I look at this and I think a strong midfielder is potentially one they might want to look at. They've obviously got Harvey Langford in the next generation. He's quite powerful, but they've also got Jack Viney and Jack Steele that are going to need replacing down the line. Midfield depth in general is probably overall something that they've got to look at and find a way next year to start blooding some of that youth alongside Steele and Viney, but then also who can they bring in to enable them to do that?
Yeah, they've gotten themselves in a great position, obviously, through the Christian Petrarca departure. The question being, what midfielders will be available to them at the 7 and 8 mark? I think, Roby's more forward midfield, but he's probably off the books. Sam Grill would be great, maybe off the books as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Cumming get past Essendon. So you're looking at Dyson Sharp as maybe one option. Ready-made player. So does an option for him playing round one next year make them too one-dimensional on top of Viney and Steele? One thing that Sharp's grown is an ability to play forward at a senior level. So, and I think just about any club that will draft him will probably have to see him play forward at some stage each game. So he's maybe one option for them as a midfielder to consider. So there'll be options for them, but it's going to be quite hard. They're another one that we'll just have to kind of wait and figure out how the first 6 selections plus bids pan out before they get a look. Tools, their key position options consistently change, like what we've seen with their off-season planning. Just this year alone, they bring in Max Heath and Brody Myercheck. So Heath more of a ruckman. I don't know if they're going to look to draft ruckman on top of having Kalani White come through, who might be in that mix, but can also play either end of the field too. Myercheck maybe has a 2-year deal, and that might be the end of it. But Jacob Van Rooyen, Matthew Jefferson, Luca Kentfield, still not known commodities. Van Rooyen more so, but he's probably taken a step back the last couple of years.
Is he that long-term option you can build your forward line around? Question that.
None of them have really emerged as number one guys. So is this the draft that they add to that? I think Aiden Schubert was one you took in the mock draft last year, and he certainly could be
last
week. Yes. And could be one for them to consider as a tall forward, or do they look to do that later in the draft? And a lot of their key position players as well have been moving pieces between the front and back line. Dan Turner now looks like a solid defender, real reliable, and that's something else that they're going to have to kind of plan for long term with Stephen May and Jake Lever, and who's coming after those guys. Harrison Petty. Is he a forward? Is he a defender? We got to figure this out this season. So there's a little bit for them to still work out. Tom McDonald's another one in that mix, but again, into his 30s and won't be around forever. So I think it's either a tall forward or a tall defender. And at picks 7 and 8, it's probably only going to be a key forward, maybe with Schubert. 37, tricky. Duffield, Noah Dorr. I'm trying to think of any of Kondo, Giannis, maybe a bit of on the smaller side for them, because I think they just want that. But all those guys are kind of the 190s, low 190s, mid 190s. So there's not that new age 200 centimeter key defender out there for them, unless it's they look at Taj Murray or Sam Ainsworth and try and play them down back. So it'll be fascinating if they do look to key position players, what they circle and who they get, for sure. I
think you've summed that up excellently. We'll move on to North Melbourne. Their draft hand, pick 25, pick 26, pick 46, pick 57. That's 1,285 points. I don't have anyone club tied this year that'll go in the draft. In terms of list needs, height, and more height would be what I'd say. So I think from those first 2 picks, if they do remain where they are, the start of the second round, Archie Ludowick might be one that's on the board, and they look at Louis Emmett as well. If they want to strengthen their stocks up forward, down back, Blake Threadgold is probably the option that might be right around that range, or he might be just off the board.
Yeah, like you said, the key position option is certainly one for them. Is it a key forward or a key defender? I think Ludovic will be one firmly in their sights. The defensive, they've started to get their defensive pieces together a little bit. Comben, Pink, and then maybe it's Will Dawson is that next one for the future. Matt Whitlock's another one that they picked up last year in the first round. So maybe it's a key forward for them this year around. And I think Ludovic's probably an ideal one. There's 2 early second round selections, so who's ahead of them in the draft? It's Gold Coast, and that pick might get swallowed up.
Yeah.
So they might get to start the second round with the first two, and they might even fetch some pretty strong interest from other clubs who want to get to the front. So they're going to be in a great position, even though they don't have a first round pick. But yeah, they'll have to obviously wait through the first night all up. If it's not a key position player, maybe some outside run. Yeah, with Harley Barker in that mock draft that involved a trade with Hawthorn last week. But I think some polish on the outside of a midfield group it's pretty star-studded inside, and just some reliable wingman halfback maybe who can just complement their engine room ensemble.
Hopefully they do. Yeah, hopefully they need to nail the key stocks of their list in order to complement, like you said, what could be a star-studded engine room of the future. Port Adelaide we move on to now. They're an interesting one. Yeah.
They've conceded that they probably won't be drafting.
Yeah.
So what that is that you do have to do a minimum 3 primary lists filled through the draft or through list upgrades, and they've confirmed that Ewan McKinley, Harrison Ram, and Josh Lye will all get primary list spots, which means that they don't actually have to make a draft selection. And I've heard Jason Cripps talk at length this offseason about how compromised the draft is, and it's not one that they're really interested in. Plus, they have to factor in their plans for 2026 and 2027 draft hauls, which we'll speak about in a sec. But at the moment, they've got pick 49. It's worth 86 points. It'll be on the trade table, and there might be a club keen to maybe St Kilda. They've only got 71 points to get Kai Fincher, who's going to fall in a quite interesting range. So St Kilda's probably one I look at as a club that might need that. And then you look at Gold Coast and Brisbane and Carlton and Essendon, who also might want some later points, even though it's just 86 points. Still a handy kind of total just to add for what might just be a future, third, fourth round pick. Was a pick 49 being an early third round pick. So there'll be suitors for it for sure. Do we want to just get into what we can still talk about for Port Adelaide, and that's who they might be getting in the next couple of years, so we don't have to just have Power fans skip through this year's draft at all, because part of the planning to get into 2026 and 2027 drafts is I guess it's up in the air, but the Dougie Cochrane ties
possibility,
a player who at this stage I think would be going pick 1 if we were drafting 2026 right now, and the Power would have to make sure that they've got the needed points if a club bid them Dougie at pick 1, which is also unlikely. So it's kind of if it's not pick 1, it's pick 2, and it's still a heap of points for them to kind of calculate. And then on top of that, it's not going to be easy for them to just trade in future firsts from 2027 to next year to get Dougie, because they've got Louis Salopek, Zemez Pilot, and Tavita Roden potentially they are club tie, but potentially in their plans as well. And that'll be we've spoken about this a couple of times this year. So ideal for a club who it's hard to know really where they're going to be standing. With when they might contend under Josh Carr, probably not for the next couple of years, but Tassie come in and they take 8 of the top 15 kids, 3 of them, 3 really well-rated teenagers for the 2027 draft being tied to Port Adelaide is just going to be a massive boost for them, and not having to worry about what Tassie are doing as much, and just being able to settle on their own players and then move on.
No, absolutely. And we know that it's a long way out from 2027 to be projecting, but you would think that at least 2 of those 3 boys would maintain their status. And there's also the question mark of Essendon for Tavita Roden.
Yes,
whether
there is that too.
Will qualify, and whether he will therefore nominate Essendon as his preference.
The one thing, and it's not necessarily something that Power fans are going to be happy about, but if Zach Butters does leave, then they are well equipped to get, if they need to get Dougie Cochrane, Salopek, Roden, and Pilot across that 2-year period. So, won't all be bad if Zach Butters leaves. I'll put it that way.
Absolutely.
For them.
Move on to Richmond. Their draft hand spearheaded by a couple of top 5 selections, picks 3 and 4, as well as pick 38. That gives them 4,417 points. Club tied player, probably worth touching on him actually before we do dive into pick 3 and 4, because he does get overlooked a little bit. You had a chat to Louis Callaway, the draft combine Mitch. He's one who, he's really been really good in the midfield for Sturt this year, can play multiple positions, which is important for the start of his career at AFL level, but he's got lots of powerful traits that probably lend themselves well to the modern game.
Yeah, well, like as you said, midfield was a big focus for him this year, and he kicked ticked plenty of boxes playing for Sturts under 18s, played a little bit of half forward, a little bit of half back across his time with SA at the Champs, more so that defensive role.
Yep.
And then he's played a bit of half forward as well through his junior career. So he sees himself as a long-term midfielder, and I think, a player who can offer some outside run maybe, and then also come in inside a little bit is exactly what Richmond need at this point. When a bid comes for him, is it before or after 38? You might think it might come after, which could set them up well. I don't know what their list spots will be like. I think they've still got a couple of off-contract guys to settle on before Friday's deadline this week, at the time we record. And then on top of that, if it comes after 38, what's next for them? What we do know though is picks 3 and 4 will give them access to 2 really good prospects from this year's draft class. Obviously, it's all just depending on what West Coast do with 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But for the Tigers, who we see as maybe some outside run and at that point in the draft, just best available players to them. The one thing they probably won't need is a big-bodied inside midfielder who can only really play midfield, given the profile of prospects they picked up last year. But best available to them might see a Sam Grill as that, maybe more of a list need actually, but best available Sullivan Roby, Xavier Taylor, as the probably 3 names that we'd consider for Richmond.
I think those would be the 3 names, So I think Sullivan Roby and Xavier Taylor would be the 2 best available, unless West Coast went with Roby, and then from a list needs point of view, then Sam Grill's that perfect outside run sort of player. So I'd agree with that. We move on to St Kilda. Their draft hand at the moment, pick 50, pick 65. That gives them 71 points, which isn't enough to match a bid at the moment for Kai Fincher. With it comes where we expect one to come, which is going to be at some stage late in the first, early in the second round, somewhere in the 20s. You'd think, with the way he finished off his season for the Dragons and Zebras, the athletic midfielder. Defender.
Yeah, so if from pick 19 to 36, there's still a discount of 86 draft points.
Yeah.
So if we say it's let's say pick 25, which is at pick was 590 points, it puts them just over 500. So that just shows how much they still have to go. Even at that point in the draft, pick 30, they'll still struggle. So as we mentioned before, Port Adelaide's pick 49's up for grabs. It's an extra 86 points. But they'll have to figure something out here, assuming that Kai Fincher gets a bid in the top 40 with their plans. And what do they do thereafter? Obviously, when a bid does come for Kai, though, 50 should be a bit shorter in the draft order and should have a few more points. The question will be if 65 comes up at least 11 spots, and even if it does, you're only getting 14 points. So there'll be a bit for them to manage. But if they get another pick in, maybe even 2 later picks, and they all go into a Kai Fincher bid, then 65, 86. 86 being after the 79 that we're kind of factoring in here, but they do have 86 and 104. They might come into the 50s and 60s, and they might do some late draft bidding, late draft picking, and might just have to just wait until everyone else has kind of started passing.
That's, if they choose to match a bid for Kai Fincher, which is not something that's certain. We know last year, for example, they didn't match bids for
Lennox Hoffman.
Down at Geelong. So in terms of list needs, key forward, Mitch is probably the area, someone to help out Max King, because you look at their forward mix and what it was this year, it's probably a little bit undersized. We know that they didn't have Max King playing, but you probably want a couple of guys up there, and it was very makeshift this year in terms of that height, that aerial.
Yeah, like you look at their options, obviously they've kept Rowan Marshall, and him and Tom Koenig will spend some time forward. Just about every minute of the game, one of those guys will be in forward, and Max King's there. Cooper Sharman, a good third tall. But is Marshall going to be there? He's 30 already, I think, or close to 30. So and if he wants to get out again, that's certainly something that they'll have to address over the next 12 months. But they could do it with this draft. Sharman's another one. Anthony Caminiti might return forward, just given the key defensive options they've picked up. But I think you'd circle Cody Curtin as a late key forward who still has tremendous upside, I think, with the season he had in the Waffle Colts in particular, and some great games with WA's under 18s at the state champs. There's certainly an option there for them to look at him late into the draft if they do want a key forward.
Sydney, their draft hand, pick 31, pick 32, pick 42, pick 63, 1,036 points. They've got 4 players who are club tied. 3 of them are quite likely to go or get bid on in the top 30, or at least are probably seen as top 30 prospects if it was an open pool power rankings. Those players being Max King, Lockie Carmichael, and then Harry Kyle as well, who's been the bolter of this year from New South Wales. And then they've got Noah Chamberlain, who they might look at a little bit later in the draft.
Yeah, I think from all the clubs who have just kind of sought points, Sydney might be the one that's currently struggling the most. And that goes to saying something given Gold Coast's position.
Yeah.
And the high-end prospects that they have to match, just because all of King, Carmichael, and Kyle could be first-round bids. And 31, 32, 42 is not going to cut it.
No, it's not.
So for a club that's also traded out their future first-round picks for the next 2 years, I'm not saying they're definitely going to get you somewhere. That's going to be tricky for them. I don't see them not coming away with it, as we've mentioned. Pardon me. The deficit is there for them to buy into, and they just kind of fall back in next year's draft order, which will already be pretty weak for them. But they're in a win now window. They're getting 3 to 4 gun academy kids, so they will be pretty well set up for the future and the now. But there's going to be a fair bit for them to work out, given a bid for Max King comes at mid-teens, as we've seen in our mock draft, mid-teen, 15 to 20 range. Carmichael and Kyle might not be far behind. Quickly becomes an uphill battle.
Yeah, it does. Yep. In terms of list needs, it's probably, if they do get the opportunity or do go down the route of picking someone from outside their academy, possibly a defender, would you think?
Tall or medium-sized, lockdown, accountable defender. Avery Thomas may be in that range of, you look at what Carmichael and Kyle can provide from an offensive point of view out of defense, but who's probably that more accountable going the other way? Avery Thomas may be one on that list, but there's going to be a little bit to play out for them.
And Avery Thomas have potentially off the board.
To have that open pool selection will be difficult in itself. But if there's one player out there that might match up well for them, it's probably him. West Coast. 7,169 points. That comes from picks 1, 2, 13, 34, 41, 53, 58. I think it's over 2,000 points more than the next highest. Obviously, that's a result of having picks 1 and 2. But Club Tigers will play a part in their draft planning, whether that's on draft night or through automatic list additions as rookie picks, or at the rookie draft, given they have an extra 4 rookie list spots. Tyler Williams, NGA, Kobe Evans, NGA, Charlie Banfield, father, son, Wes Wally, NGA. From those 4, if we're probably picking national draft selections, Tyler Williams and then maybe Charlie Banfield. I'll probably leave it at that.
Yeah, probably. Kobe Evans has just been unlucky with injury. AFL Academy, we've seen what he can do very spasmodically when he has got on the park this year.
Yeah, he did have a good game against, I think it was the Coburg game. At Whitten Oval. I was very impressed.
And played a couple of good Waffle Colts games and did get a Waffle League debut. So there's the possibility he gets bid on late. Wes Wally probably more of a rookie selection. In terms of list needs, clearly with 1 and 2, it's best available, and that'll probably address the list need in some way as well. But star power from a West Coast point of view, they need future A graders.
Ready-made. Ready-made, maybe it comes into that a little bit, but a player that they can rely on as a household name for them from this draft. Willem Dersman has been the one that's been talked about at length, certainly on this show, and he's going to bring an element of that but he's not going to be your inside ball winner just yet. Maybe in the long term, and there might be some midfield opportunities for him next year. But you'd think he starts as a defender, third tall or kind of just rebounding player option at plus 190 centimeters. So he's one. It seems like it's going to be quite hard for them, or quite hard to see them not pick him at pick 1 or maybe pick 2, but probably pick 1. So who's that next selection? Who is pick 2 for West Coast? Cooper Duff Tytler's 1, Sullivan Roby's 1. Dyson Sharp would be ideal. I just think if they can either advance from pick 13 up the board a little bit to get him, I think that would be a smart move at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they certainly need a player of that type. They're probably short and rucks.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, it's not going to be easy to get into that in one of Richmond's, Essendon's, or Melbourne's picks, I don't think. Melbourne maybe, but then they would only do that if Sharps maybe have passed Essendon. And they would probably be putting offers to Essendon anyway. if they really wanted to package something and get into the top 10 once more. So Sharp would be a great fit. Ready-made, star power, strong midfielder, ticks all those boxes.
Yeah.
But when you also want to factor in best available, he's probably not in that 1-2 range for West Coast. So that's the tricky situation when West Coast fans have probably fallen in love with Dyson Sharp this year and what they see he could offer immediately next year. But
long term, it is a real balance. Western Bulldogs, the last club. Pick 14 is going to be a really interesting one. That headlines what they've got. They've also got picks 33, 70, and 74, 1406 points. Their club tied player is Will Darcy, who has grown significantly this year. It's what he's done at APS level that's really enamored some people, and probably his career is going to be played more so in defence than attack. It looks like at this point. We know that can change, but yeah, he's got some height about him. Obviously the brother of Sam Darcy, so some good pedigree there. In terms of list needs, we know that they didn't pick up a defender in the trade period, so that might be the area that they target. But are you able to do it through this draft? You'd probably suggest not, because they need some real height down there. Pick 14, they could go and take Blake Threadgold, but probably suggest that small forward is the sort of player that's more likely to come in and play a role immediately, whereas someone like a Blake Threadgold, as good as he is going to need a couple of years to develop. How does that go with where their list is at the moment and where they see themselves? Are they able to contend in 2026, 2027? If so, maybe they bring in a small forward who can assist with that. Lockie Doverston and Latrell Sumner pick at a couple of those guys.
I'm just looking, is there anyone that they could trade back for just a little bit? I don't think 15 and 18 for Gold Coast makes sense for them. 17 and 23 for Brisbane probably leaves the Lions with fewer points. I think that there are a few names that the Dogs would like, and Doverston's probably one that is in that 14 range. But if they moved back a couple of spots, he might still be there, and they could double dip and get a Threadgold, or it's Sumner Pickett and someone else, or those two later guys. So there's I think there's an option for them, but I just don't see a clear suitor. With maybe 2 first-round picks or 2 later selections after 14 that are going to work that way. Yeah, as you said, a key defender for this year. Well, they went for Cal Wilkie this year, and I think they're flagged that they might rekindle that interest next year. But if they're the club that's all in on Zach Butters as a front runner, then it makes next year's draft pretty hard for them to have much of a say in if they're probably going to be trading the capital they need to get a player of his quality. So Will Darcy's obviously one name, as you mentioned, and Threadgold's the other. And the small forwards, it's Doverston or Latrell Sumner Pickett. If it's later in the draft, Hugo Makunda and Taylor Byrne were others you kind of mentioned earlier. In that kind of next few tiers back. So I think that's kind of the profile for the Dogs, those names.
No, very good. I reckon that's about a wrap, Mitch.
Next week, power rankings.
Final last one for the season.
So we got 50 names, just a bit of a reshuffling and some new names from this month. We'll have to wait and see. Now we might have a little touch on maybe some of the state league guys who mature ages who might be sitting in those power rankings or maybe sitting just outside and might be in the mix for this year's AFL draft. And then our final mock draft coming the week after. Jeez, it's not far away, is it?
No, it's not.
We're into the national draft. So stay tuned on Craft Draft on Instagram, Zero Hanger on YouTube, and zerohanger.com.au for all your latest AFL draft content.